Thank you, Caroline. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. I'm going to put the little clicker for the slides, and there we go. I argue in my biography of William G. Bowen that he was the most consequential leader in American higher education in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. My objective this morning is to lay out the case for this assertion by examining Bowen's presidency of Princeton, his presidency of the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, the many books he authored, his impact on public policy, and his overall stature among educators and those beyond the academy, all in about 27 minutes at the rate we're going here. Bowen, an economist, joined the Princeton faculty in 1958 after earning his Ph.D. from the university. He was tenured in 1961, made a full professor in 1965. In 1967, he became the first full-time provost of the university. In 1972, he became president, a position he held until January 1988. Bowen's many contributions in reshaping Princeton began when he was provost. Working in close concert with President Robert F. Goheen, he helped to craft a governance structure and a set of strategies to lessen the disruptions at Princeton during the period of intense tumult on college campuses over race and the Vietnam War. In a different area, Bowen pressed a reluctant Goheen to embrace coeducation as critical to Princeton's future, and he recruited economics professor Gardner Patterson to write the report, The Education of Women at Princeton, on which the case for coeducation rested. Bowen advised Patterson on everything from strategy and data collection to wording. He worked to sell the plan to alumni, and once the trustees approved, he attended to the many details required to implement it successfully. As president of Princeton, Bowen purposefully remade the university in multiple ways. His first priority, he said, was, in his words, to increase the intellectual muscle of the faculty through targeted recruiting and higher standards for appointments and promotions. And there was ample evidence of his success: Nobel Prizes, elections to national academies, ability to go head-to-head with major universities around the world in recruiting, evident growth in the intellectual stature of departments. Take the example of Nobel Prizes. 8 Nobels were awarded to faculty members Bowen recruited. He saw to the appointment of stars in already strong departments like math, physics, and philosophy, and he made less strong ones stronger by recruiting outstanding faculty of the caliber of Bernard Lewis, Victor Brombert, Lionel Gossman, and Toni Morrison. Bowen's other most important priority, he said, was making the student body more diverse and more inclusive. And that meant active recruitment of Black students, early efforts to recruit Latino and Asian American students, the embrace of equal access and admissions for women and men. Along with recruitment went efforts to refashion institutional structures to be more open and more welcoming. Those included changes in the operations of the university chapel, rethinking of ceremonial convocations to make them more ecumenical and more inclusive of students of many faiths. They included the establishment of a Center for Jewish Life and the creation of a Third World Center, now the Carl Field Center for Equality and Cultural Understanding. On Bowen's watch, the university provided some institutional support for the legal campaign to require the remaining all-male eating clubs to admit women. And it established a residential college system to provide an intellectual, cultural, social, and recreational home base for the increasingly diverse student population. The Princeton Bowen inherited in 1972 was still struggling to shake off its historical identity as a very good liberal arts college for Protestant boys of good social standing, mainly from the mid-Atlantic and southern states. The Princeton Bowen turned over to his successor, Harold Shapiro, in 1988, had vaulted into the ranks of the world's great research universities. During Bowen's 18-year presidency at the Mellon Foundation, he extended his vision broadly to higher education writ large. He doubled down on Mellon's historical investments in graduate education, liberal arts colleges, libraries, museums, and performing arts institutions, adding Eastern Europe and South Africa to its traditional focus in the United States. He instituted new programs that had a major impact in higher education. I'll give you two examples. The first, the Mellon Mays Undergraduate Fellowship Program, which has prepared hundreds of college students of color for teaching and administrative positions in the academy. The second example, JSTOR, the electronic journal storage project that has transformed access to scholarly journals for faculty and students around the world and has made an immense contribution to scholarly productivity. I think that Bowen's biggest contribution as president of Mellon was intellectual. He persuaded college and university presidents to hand over an unprecedented trove of student-level data, and he created a massive database, college and beyond, that opened new paths for social science research about issues profoundly important to colleges and universities, in particular, affirmative action, college athletics, and access and college completion for low-income and first-generation college students. Much of that scholarship was Bowen's own. When Bowen died, the New York Times said that his books, and I quote, helped define the nation's academic agenda. The Chronicle of Higher Education put it this way, and again I quote, "It was as an author that Mr. Bowen fully made his mark as one of academia's consciences, and often as one of its most influential critics. He essayed higher education from a strikingly wide range of vantage points, often predicting, if not activating, tectonic shifts." The exemplary book, of course, was the volume Bowen published with Derek Bach in 1998, the highly acclaimed The Shape of the River, which presented a compelling, data-driven case for the benefits of affirmative action. Bowen and Bach demonstrated that race-sensitive admissions policies brought tangible benefits to individuals admitted to highly selective colleges and universities, and through them, to the larger society. Minority students, they wrote, had strong academic credentials when they entered college, graduated in large numbers, and did very well after leaving college, taking positions of consequence in law, business, medicine, and other professions, and playing significant roles in the civic life of their communities. The more selective the college or university the student attended, the better the student's record of academic achievement and the higher the level of satisfaction with the college experience. Bowen and The Shape of the River provided key support as the Michigan affirmative action cases made their way through the courts. Bowen himself worked hard to rally influential amicus briefs from the military and from major corporations, and the book offered empirical evidence to support the view that student body diversity enhances the educational experience with no trade-off with respect to quality. When public universities rallied to stand beside Michigan, the book gave them ammunition to use in their amicus briefs. In Grutter v. Bollinger in 2003, when the Supreme Court reaffirmed the constitutionality of using race as a factor in admission decisions, the majority opinion written by Sandra Day O'Connor cited The Shape of the River in support of the proposition that admitting a racially diverse class served a compelling public interest. In addition to affirmative action, there were also influential books, some of them growing out of college and beyond, about college athletics, college access and college completion, college and university governance, board governance, technology and higher education, the agenda ahead for higher education, and Bowen's reflections on what he had learned over the decades as a university president and someone close to presidents' offices. As well, Bowen published long pieces in the Chronicle and other outlets, some of them forecasting and summarizing the books, others addressing current controversies in higher education. I think it's fair to say that there was no leader in American higher education who was more widely published or more widely read. There was also no one who had a more direct impact on public policy. Two examples illustrate the point. As for affirmative action, that influence began well before Shape of the River, when Bowen published a long piece, Admissions and the Relevance of Race, in the Princeton Alumni Weekly in September 1977. As it happened, Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell, who was visiting the campus in October to meet with some classes, got hold of that PAW, and he marked up Bowen's article extensively. When he returned to his chambers in Washington, he told one of his clerks, a Princeton valedictorian, as it happens, that they should try to include as many quotes as possible from Bowen in what became their decision in the Bakke case in 1978. And they did indeed include quotes from Bowen's essay in that decision. The second way in which Bowen scholarship affected policy has to do with the admission to leading colleges and universities of first-generation and low-income college students. Now, that's a current preoccupation in colleges and universities, and I think it's influenced directly by Bowen's data-driven call for institutions, in his words, to put a thumb on the scale on those students' behalf. This is a commitment that is now widely articulated at leading colleges and universities. As Princeton President Christopher Eisgruber demonstrated on his president's page in the Princeton Alumni Weekly in November of 2023, undergraduate students representing the top 10% of households in the United States by income dropped from just under 70% of the Princeton student body in 2002 to 44% today. Now, that doesn't just happen. It happens because of deliberate effort to recruit and admit first-generation and low-income students, and the expectation is that that effort will continue. The Princeton trustees have just announced the goal going forward for admission and financial aid of at least 70% of undergraduate students on financial aid and at least 22% Pell Grant eligible. Eisgruber acknowledges he is acting on what he learned from Bowen. He read Bowen's stuff before he became president and decided that this is a commitment that he would make. And there are similar commitments at other leading universities. Finally, a word about Bowen's stature within higher education and beyond. Bowen was in the business of identifying, placing, and advising university presidents. His communication and networking skills were unmatched. Colleagues called him, and I quote, the president whisperer, and again I quote, a switchboard for higher education. He knew everyone in the academy, and he knew the skills required to move institutions forward, to lay out a vision and get agreement from multiple constituencies to keep the institution from fracturing in situations fraught with disagreement and student unrest. Trustees who were looking for new presidents called him all the time for specific recommendations and candid judgments. And once his protégés assumed office, his advice and example influenced their conduct. What would Bill do became a persistent refrain. At the same time, Bowen himself served on many corporate and public and private sector boards. He became widely recognized in most of those settings as the wisest person at the table, the director others looked to address the most challenging, thorniest problems the board faced. So to sum up, Bowen had a big impact in taking on the biggest, most challenging problems that bedeviled American higher education in the half-century 1966 to 2016. He had a remarkable gift for identifying those problems, for seeing around corners to forecast the challenges to come. And he offered well-thought-out measures to address them. He did that at Princeton and Mellon, in the 20 books he wrote, and at Ithaca, the nonprofit he created with Mellon funding to do research and experiments to improve higher education with a special focus on efforts to use digital learning to control rising costs. And in all of those settings, Bowen wrote about and promoted initiatives to address central problems such as cost disease, inclusion, affirmative action, college access, college completion, and online learning. He laid out both a scholarly case and a practical blueprint that could be used and adapted by other leaders of his own and subsequent eras. It was in his writing that Bowen had the most significant impact, I think. That was true in part because of his own efforts to think systematically about the problems of higher education and what a responsible institution should do about them. It was true also because of his initiative in collecting student-level data and demonstrating fairly simple ways of analyzing it, efforts that other scholars could then carry forward with an array of other databases and more sophisticated analytic methods. Bowen had an unusual ability to better the situations of the institutions and people he touched. The institutions he led were demonstrably stronger, more influential, more efficacious, and more impactful than they had been before he took over. As for the people he touched, Bowen had a profound impact on so many individuals. He did that in part by creating and strengthening academic programs and financial aid programs that provided access to life-changing educational opportunities. But he did it also by touching personally so many people, young people just starting out, mature individuals on the cusp of new opportunities, people for whom a conversation with Bowen or a recommendation from Bowen resulted in a reset of professional direction with access to new possibilities never previously imagined. He was exceptionally generous in trying to help people, and his concern for other people, I think, from the most accomplished to the least advantaged, was genuine. Bowen focused on advancing the fortunes of groups peripheral to the power structure in American society: Jews, blacks, women. He elevated individuals to positions of opportunity and positions of leadership. And he advanced policies that made a material difference in the standing of groups previously overlooked or discriminated against in the sort of institutions he led. It says 0. I think we're good.
Perfect timing. Thank you. Thank you so much. And we are a room full of people interested in education and educators, so I'm sure there will be lots of questions. There's one in the balcony.
Conrad Harper, New York City. Nancy, I want to know the seeds of Bill Bowen's greatness.
So where did it come from?
Yes.
That's a really good question, Conrad, and I'm not sure I can fully answer it. Bill grew up in a lower middle class family in Wyoming, Ohio. His father sold cash registers for NCR out of the back of his station wagon, and his father died midway through Bill's senior year in high school. So there he is, without any, his mother is still alive, but without a family tradition of education or leadership. And he goes off to Denison University, and essentially he resolves to recreate himself. He does not want to be the person who comes out of the family situation and the community setting that he lives in. He doesn't want to grow up. He doesn't want to live in a world in which sports and sports and sales, he says, are the main subjects of conversation. So he excels in Denison. He decides to go to graduate school and discovers, when he goes to graduate school, the possibilities for intellectual leadership, but also for institutional leadership. And he's absolutely committed to using the resources he can marshal to create a fairer and more just environment for the people around him and for other people. He says in part that that's because he grew up in a setting where his high school, Wyoming High School, was half black. He had many families in Wyoming either came from executives at Procter & Gamble, from laborers in neighboring factories, a very mixed background. So I think he was determined not to be the person he was born as, and he was determined to do what he could to create more opportunity for people who had less. That doesn't really answer the question, but it's the best I can do.
Questions? Yes.
David Hollinger, Berkeley. Nancy, you mentioned the Bakke case and invoked Bowen's indirect influence even on Powell. Now, since we remember the Powell opinion as having very considerably diminished the flexibility of universities in practicing affirmative action, requiring that it go through the concept of diversity, thereby conflating color with culture in ways that social scientists and philosophers have argued about for the last 47 years. I'm wondering whether Bowen resisted Powell's innovation and whether he spoke publicly against it, or was he okay with it?
He did not resist it. He did not speak publicly against it. He was just learning then, about how do you frame these issues. And when he wrote Admissions and the Relevance of Race, that was new territory for him, but also for his fellow college presidents, for others who thought that he had framed the issue in ways that were much better than they had ever seen or imagined. But it was all diversity. It was all exposure to students from different backgrounds will enhance the educational experience of other students. So it was all in a vein that you would say, gosh, he should have gone further than that, but he didn't.
More questions? I might take a moment, Nancy, to ask a question. You've spoken about his vision for personnel of faculty, his vision for student body, and all those ways in which higher education could expand. Did he have a vision for what the content of the education should be? That is, what should be taught in these classrooms populated by more distinguished faculty, by more diverse students? Did he have a vision for what would go on in the classroom that might be different from what had gone on before?
You know, he thought, hire the very best faculty, put them together with the very best students. The faculty will figure out collectively and individually what to teach. So creative vision on curriculum was not part of the deal.
Okay, good. Well, I think we're out of, oh, there's one more question. Yes, Linda.
Thanks. I'm wondering, Nancy, if you have any thoughts about who among subsequent college presidents, university presidents, might have been or might now be his successors?
You know, that's a really good question. If you look at the lineage, in the mid-20th century, Clark Kerr is clearly the towering figure. And then my view is Bill succeeds him. And there are other wonderful presidents in this period. Hannah Gray, Derek Bach. But I don't think any of them has quite the impact that Bill does. And I think that what has happened since Bill is it's very hard to identify the successor president who speaks for higher education. I think that's one of the many problems we have with higher education today and higher education and the political world in which we live, that there isn't a single person who everyone would look to say, let's listen to what X has to say. And exactly why that is a more complicated question, of course, but I don't know who it is.
Thank you so much. And how much time?